this brings us, I think, perhaps at least to start moving toward what you and I have talked about, which is we always want these podcasts to have a practical call to action. Now,
Yeah.
when this podcast drops, we will be about a month away from Easter. And I know that many who are watching this right now are saying, well, I already chose my Easter songs. I know I'm doing Christ the Lord is Risen Today. I know I'm doing the latest Phil Wickham song about the resurrection. I know I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Some of you do Gaither. Some of you don't even know who Gaither is. Anyway, the bottom line is many of you have already made some decisions. But here's what I want to encourage you to do. I want you to act as though you are tabula rasa for a moment. I want you to go to tabula rasa. What does that mean? Ground zero. Nothing planned. Okay? You have this plethora of music that's been used throughout the decades and centuries at Easter, Resurrection Day. And so the first thing I want you to do, we're going to go right back to that principle of discernment. What is the premise of discernment? Okay? The premise of discernment for what you choose, if you are choosing the music for your church. I'm doing this for a church upstate New York this coming Easter. And I'm connecting with for a couple of months. And my approach is, who is coming? Who might be coming? How far are they coming from, or from where are they coming? What is the cultural mix? What's the generational mix? You see where I'm going with this? What's the religious mix? All right? And there are other questions to ask. It's kind of like the newspaper reporter, right? That asks the how, what, way, where, all those W's, right? So the reason I bring this up is because what you want to do on any given Sunday, but particularly on a Sunday where you know that some folks are going to come that don't normally darken the door of your church, is the pastor has to pick a message that is relevant to everyone who's there. He doesn't want to alienate even the person who's hostile toward the Judeo-Christian worldview. Do you see how far out I went on that? Not even the Bible. They're just hostile to the Judeo-Christian worldview. They want nothing to do with it. But they're there on that Sunday because mother just asked them to come and they're going to have Easter meal together. But he or she is there. How do you connect with that person, as well as the person all the way on the spectrum to the person that's on fire for God? You know, the person, I'm on fire for, I'm not making fun of that, by the way. I'm just saying, you know, the person that's on fire, they are just totally there. They are about as close to the Apostle Paul as anyone in that church. How do you somehow provide a musical experience and a worship experience that touches them all? It takes margin. It takes thinking. It takes prayer. It takes consideration. It takes talking to others. Some of you might want to call Joey. I don't know if he's going to give his number, or email him, or email me.
You can email me for sure.
Yeah, an email, right? But you might want to talk to someone who's been at it for a while. What do you do? What is your perspective? How do you touch the person? Because the bottom line is that you have probably about 15 to 20 minutes on average in a church to make a connection with people who are there. Some who are going to just go, I'm not into this at all. And others who are going to be like this from the beginning. They walk into the church with their eyes closed and their arms raised, right? That spectrum is so wide. So what do you need to do? You need to take some time to figure out the music that's not going to please everybody. Every song will not please everybody. That's a principle across the board anyway. But you want to choose the music that you know will be done, number one, here's the number one principle, done well. I was having this conversation with my wife this morning. I was playing, believe it or not, Joe, you're going to love this. You remember the old Maranatha choruses from the Praise albums, Praise 1 through 37, whatever, how many albums they did? Those are very special to me. And I came across them on my Apple Music library, and I started playing them, and my wife was really funny. She loves that music. It goes back to her original discipleship, but she's really not into it now, and I get that. And I said, hon, there are some songs on this playlist that I would never do. If Joey asked me to come to Long Hill Chapel, I wouldn't choose a song like that, nor would he let me. But there might be an old classic like I Love You, Lord, that you sprinkle in, and if it's chosen, it must be done well. Because what people will remember about the song may not be so much the style. They'll remember maybe the content, but they want to know that it's done well. even that hostile, here's a principle for you. The hostile anti-Judeo-Christian worldview attender of your Easter service may think that the content of these songs are crazy. Christ the Lord is risen today? What the heck are you talking about? Excuse the slang. But that's what they would probably say, something worse that we couldn't say here. But what that person needs to sense is that time was taken to do it well. I've seen people take really relevant, wonderful songs on a particular Sunday, even Easter, and they just don't do it well. It is mediocre.
They just don't hit. Yeah. And I think, a principle to that is a Maya Angelou quote that I love, which is, people will forget what you said, they will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And excellence is a feeling. It's not just the quality. It's not just the visual. It's, they took time with this.
Right.
They sat with this. They prayed about this. This was intentional. This was executed well because they took the time. That's a feeling. And you can capture that through the discernment, through the margin, through everything that we've said.
Yeah.
But, to land the plane a little on that, it's that, what do you want them to walk out with?
Yes.
Like, yes, you're right. You got 15 minutes at best to connect with them. You need to do it well. You need to do it with excellence. You need to make sure that they feel something. How do you want them to walk out? Do you want them to walk out going, I don't remember anything? Or are you setting the table so that the Spirit of God, very similar to the Spirit in structure, can you set the table so that they can have an encounter with God that is non-distracting, high quality, and pointing them to Jesus? That's discernment.
Well said. You did land the plane. I'm not going to try to take off again, but I am going to add one more thing as we're coming on the tarmac, getting ready to settle the passengers into Gate 7.
Yeah.
I will say this. I think it is, and you said it already well, it is a feeling, but it is also something that touches the mind and touches the discernment of what I call objective art. Someone may not like the style of a particular song. I use that song, He is Lord, He is Lord, He is risen from the dead. Now, that's as old as the hills. And most churches who are modern worship churches will not use it. But every once in a while, a smart and wise, discerning worship leader who has a congregation that remembers when that was the hit. Remember, there was a time when that was a new song, right? In this generation. They will sprinkle that in, not long, but just enough to give that person what you just indicated with the word feeling. I think we have a responsibility to touch and meet people at their emotions, not perfectly, but and by the way, this is another element of discernment. You have to discern the emotional landscape of your congregation. You got to find out, what do they like? What do they listen to during the week? Not that you're going to make every decision based upon that. But when you get together with John and Susie and they're in their 70s and they're listening, maybe they came from a secular background and they listen to 70s pop. They're into Chicago and the Carpenters and Billy Joel. Well, that doesn't mean you're going to do the Carpenters and Billy Joel the next week, but it gives you an insight along with the person that grew up in church and they went like this to all of that. I was kind of that way when I was a kid. Oh, Billy Joel, oh no. Billy Joel, we all know how talented, but I wasn't into his lyrics. I wasn't into his lifestyle. So you have people like me that now I went eclectic later on steroids, but that's neither here nor there. The point about this is, again, it comes back, we keep saying this, it comes back to discerning. It's not just discerning from the Lord the wisdom that is needed to make the decisions about worship nomenclature. It's also discerning who is in your congregation and who, this is key, who they might bring. One of the questions I used to ask some of our folks was, hey, if you were to bring someone to church, who might that be? Tell me about that person. You want that person to come to know Christ as their Savior, right? So we don't want to do anything at our church that would get in the way of that, at least not consciously. So these are all nuances and tributaries of discernment that relate to. Now, some of you are thinking to myself, boy, if that's what this is all about. I don't want to have anything to do with the worship set. Hey, Joey, you and I know that we live in an age where it's probably more difficult now to be a worship leader choosing music for the average congregation than ever before, right? Ever before. We've kind of come through the worship
for sure.
Right. So you and I, this is a podcast for another time, as we often say, but we should probably address the whole history of worship wars and how that's morphed. And it's less of an issue now, but the underlying elements of worship war premises are always there. It's kind of like the seeds of faction in the church. They're like the seeds of cancer are always in our body. And if we're not immune and we're not healthy, they can rise up and take over. So I like to say this, the seeds of worship wars and division over worship nomenclature and decisions are always there. A wise worship leader will lead the congregation by discerning who they are, what is it that they enjoy, and find a way to bring an eclectic mix of worship nomenclature that blesses everyone. And at the same time, I keep saying this, at the same time, because my heart is for the unbeliever walking in. If an unbeliever is there, taking into consideration that they are there as you are making these decisions. So there's a vertical discernment, right? And there's a horizontal discernment that has to take place.
Tim, this has been great. I've really enjoyed this conversation. If people want to follow up with Worship Plus, they're interested in consulting, how do they get in touch with you?
No, if they want to get in contact with Worship Plus, the best way to do that would be to one of two ways. Go to the website, worshipplus.org. There's a section down below where you can fill in the information and we'll be in contact with you. Or even more direct would be to email us at the following email, info@worshipplus. It's spelled out. It's probably right there on the screen, worshipplus.org, info@worshipplus.org. And those emails come directly to me. And I promise you that I will respond within 30 seconds. I mean, no, I'm sorry. I'll respond in a reasonable amount of time. But seriously, we do want you to feed back to us. We also, Joey, I know that you would agree with me on this. We would love to get feedback from you about this podcast. What are the subject matters that you would like to see us address? If you're in the worship space, whether you're a team member or you're a leader or you're an aspiring leader, I've told Joey on a number of occasions, I want to be someone who, at the age of 62 now, having done this for a long time, I still love doing it. I'm kind of like coach player. I want to be able to help encourage and equip the next generation, especially the much younger generation of worship leaders, men and women who feel that God is calling them to lead the people in the spirit and the letter of what the Bible describes as the role of the Levite. The role of the Levite. By the way, a little shout out to my friend Seth Nix back a while ago on one of our podcasts. I think it was number 5 or 6 or whatever it was. Seth Nix, African-American worship leader in New Jersey, he did a great job describing the role of the worship leader in the Levitical role, the Levite role. Very important. So I see this as just as important, okay? Just as important as what the seminaries are doing in training up the next generation of men and women to teach and preach the word of God. This whole area cannot be left to a bunch of people that have a really good ability on the guitar and they get up and lead a song. God help us. We need worship leaders that are deep in their understanding of theology and sound theology, deep in their relationship of intimacy with Christ, and at the same time, committed and developing in an artistically excellent way. So that's where we are at this point.
Worship Plus is also on Facebook, Instagram, and obviously you're watching this on YouTube. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. It really helps get this message out into other spaces, and so we would appreciate that. If you found this encouraging, please like and share this episode. There's going to be more conversations, but Tim, thank you so much for giving us your time and insight into this topic of discernment. I can't wait for the next one.
Joey, thank you. It's been great.